Blood-splattered letters fluttered across the dust-strewn main street of Redemption Springs, as Ellie Davidson clutched her tattered valise and stared at the aftermath of the stagecoach robbery. It was 1876, and she had arrived in the Arizona Territory with nothing but $20 sewn into her hem and a teaching certificate that now meant nothing since the school had burned down 2 weeks prior to her arrival. The bandits had taken the strongbox but left the passengers alive small mercies in a land that seemed to offer none. "Miss, you hurt." The deep voice behind her belonged to a man tall enough to block the setting sun, his shadow stretching before her like a harbinger of safety in this lawless place. "No, sir," Ellie replied, her Boston accent marking her as clearly as if she'd worn a sign reading Easterner. "Just lost, it seems, in more ways than one." The man, broad-shouldered with dust-caked clothes and eyes the color of a summer storm, removed his hat, revealing dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. "Name's Kyle Owens. Folks round here call me Ranger, on account of my time with the Texas Rangers before settling here." "Ellie Davidson," she replied, offering her gloved hand. "Formerly employed as the new schoolteacher of Redemption Springs, but it seems the position has been eliminated." Kyle's weathered face softened. "Heard about that fire. Bad business." He looked around at the other passengers being tended to by townspeople who'd come running at the sound of gunshots. "You got someplace to go?" "I was to board with the mayor's family, but given the circumstances." "Well, Miss Davidson, I've got a ranch about 5 miles north. It ain't much, and my twins keep it lively enough to drive a saint to drink, but I've got a spare room if you need somewhere to stay until you figure things out." Before Ellie could respond, 2 identical faces peered from behind Kyle's legs, a boy and a girl, both around 6 years old with their father's storm-cloud eyes and unruly dark hair. They studied her with the careful assessment of children who'd grown up learning to read both people and the land. "Pa," the girl whispered loudly, tugging at his dusty trousers. "Can we keep her? The house needs a lady." Her brother nodded vigorously. "She's pretty, Pa, and she talks fancy." Heat rushed to Ellie's cheeks as Kyle gave his children a stern but affectionate look. "Elizabeth, Joseph, this is Miss Davidson. She's a teacher, not a stray pup." He turned back to Ellie with an apologetic smile. "My wife, Sarah, passed during a fever that hit these parts 3 years back. The twins were just 3 then. They've gotten it in their heads that every unmarried woman might be willing to take on a widower with 2 wild youngsters." "Pa," Elizabeth persisted, "you always say ask permission, so ask her." Kyle's expression was a mixture of embarrassment and resignation as he looked at Ellie. "Miss Davidson, my children would like to know if you'd consider staying with us, but I'll tell you plain, it's entirely up to you. My ranch is modest, the work is hard, and these 2" he ruffled the twins' hair, "will test your patience, something fierce. So I reckon the only answer I can give them is, if she'll let us." Ellie looked down at the twins' hopeful faces, then at the chaotic street around her. She'd come west for adventure, for purpose, for a new beginning after losing her parents to influenza. The school was gone, but perhaps Providence had another plan. "I accept your hospitality, Mr. Owens," she said with a smile, "at least until I can secure other arrangements." Kyle's ranch sat nestled against the foothills, a sturdy 2-story house built from pine and river stone. A corral held several horses, and beyond that stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the late afternoon sun. It wasn't the grandest property Ellie had seen, but it was well-maintained, a testament to Kyle's industry. "It's beautiful," she remarked as they approached in his wagon, the twins bouncing excitedly beside her on the seat. "Been in my family since '58, Kyle explained. "My pa came out from Tennessee, built it up from nothing. I took over after he passed during the war between the states." Ellie asked cautiously, aware of how the conflict still divided many. Kyle nodded. "Fought for the Union. Pa did too, though most round here sided with the Confederacy, made for some tense years afterward, but folks mostly live and let live now." As they pulled up to the house, an older woman emerged from the door, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes crinkled with warmth as she spotted the twins. Mrs. Abernathy, Kyle called out, we've got ourselves a guest. This is Miss Davidson. She's the teacher who was meant for the school. Lord above, child, when I heard about that robbery after the school burning, I thought you'd be halfway back to wherever you came from by now, Mrs. Abernathy said, helping Ellie down from the wagon. You've got grit, I'll give you that, Mrs. Abernathy comes by 3 times a week to help with the house and the twins, Kyle explained. Been a godsend since Sarah passed. The children need a woman's influence, Mrs. Abernathy stated firmly, and this one's been trying to manage it all himself, stubborn as he is. The house was simple but comfortable, a large kitchen and sitting area downstairs, with bedrooms above. Mrs. Abernathy showed Ellie to a modest room that overlooked the eastern pastures. It was the sewing room, she explained, but I cleared it out when Kyle mentioned bringing you here. Those twins, she chuckled, shaking her head, been trying to find their pa wife since they learned to talk proper. Oh, I'm not, Ellie began, flustered. Course you're not, dear, you just arrived, but fair warning, those children are determined and they've got their pa's stubbornness. That evening, after a simple supper of beef stew and cornbread, the twins sat at Ellie's feet while Kyle tended to the accounts at a desk by the fireplace. The domesticity of it all struck her as both foreign and comforting. Miss Davidson, Joseph asked, do you know stories? All teachers know stories, Elizabeth declared before Ellie could answer. It's a rule, Ellie smiled. I do know quite a few, would you like to hear one? Yes, please, they chorused. Even Kyle set down his pencil, settling back in his chair as Ellie began a tale about a clever fox who outwitted a wolf. She had always prided herself on her storytelling, using different voices for each character and dramatic pauses that had the twins leaning forward in anticipation. When she finished, Kyle was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. That was mighty fine telling, Miss Davidson, he said softly. Better than Pa's stories, Joseph whispered loudly. Pa just tells the same ones over and over, Elizabeth added. Kyle laughed. Hard to compete with a proper educated teacher. Now you two, time for bed. The twins groaned but obeyed, each giving Ellie a spontaneous hug before racing upstairs. Kyle watched them go with a mixture of pride and weariness. They're wonderful children, Ellie said sincerely. They're a handful, Kyle corrected, but his eyes shone with love. Sarah was the patient one. I'm more suited to breaking horses than raising children some days. I think you're doing admirably. They're kind, polite, and clearly adore you. Kyle looked at her for a long moment. Forgive me for being forward, Miss Davidson, but I'm curious what brought a refined Boston lady all the way to Arizona territory to teach in a frontier school. Ellie smoothed her skirt, considering her answer. After my parents died, there was little keeping me in Boston. I had trained as a teacher, but positions for unmarried women were limited. When I saw the advertisement for Redemption Springs, well, it offered both employment and adventure. Adventure, Kyle repeated, a smile playing at his lips. That's one word for it. Most Easterners who come seeking adventure go running back after their first dust storm or rattlesnake encounter. Perhaps I'm made of sterner stuff than most Easterners, Ellie challenged. Perhaps you are at that, Kyle conceded. Well, Miss Davidson, I meant what I said in town. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Redemption Springs might still have use for a teacher once things settle. Thank you, Mr. Owens. Your kindness won't be forgotten. As the days turned into weeks, Ellie found herself slipping into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose with the sun, helped Mrs. Abernathy prepare breakfast, and spent mornings teaching the twins from the books she'd brought west. Afternoons were spent learning the practical aspects of frontier living, churning butter, preserving foods, and even rudimentary horse riding under Kyle's patient instruction. Keep your heels down, he called as she trotted around the corral on a gentle mare named Buttercup. And relax your shoulders, the horse feels your tension. I'm trying, Ellie replied, gripping the saddle horn as Buttercup picked up pace. But this is considerably different from the side saddle lessons I had in Boston. Kyle walked alongside, one hand ready to steady her if needed. Side saddle's fine for Boston parks, but out here, you need to be able to ride proper if you're going any distance. Is that why you're teaching me, so I can ride proper when I leave? The question slipped out before she could think better of it. Kyle's stride faltered. That why you're learning? Planning on leaving soon, their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. I haven't decided yet, Ellie admitted. The mayor mentioned they might rebuild the school by winter. Right, Kyle nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Well, riding's a useful skill regardless. The twins were less subtle about their intentions. They had taken to referring to Ellie as our Miss Davidson when speaking to neighbors or townsfolk who visited the ranch. At night, Elizabeth would ask Ellie to braid her hair just like Ma used to, while Joseph brought her interesting rocks and feathers he found, solemnly explaining the significance of each gift. One evening in late June, as fireflies danced outside the windows and a gentle rain pattered on the roof, Ellie sat in the sitting room mending one of Joseph's shirts. The twins had been put to bed, and Kyle had just returned from checking on a pregnant mare in the barn. "You're good with them," he said, warming his hands by the fire. "Better than they deserve sometimes." Ellie smiled, not looking up from her stitching. "They're delightful children, spirited, yes, but thoughtful in ways that surprise me daily." "They've taken to you something fierce," Kyle said, his voice carefully even. "Mrs. Abernathy says they talk about you non-stop even when you're not around." "I've grown quite attached to them as well," Ellie admitted. Kyle sat in the chair opposite her, studying her face in the firelight. "Miss Davidson, Ellie, if I may, I've been meaning to ask you something." Her heart quickened inexplicably. "Yes, the school board met yesterday. They're planning to rebuild, hoping to have it ready by October. Mayor Thompson asked if you were still interested in the position." "Oh." The single syllable hung between them, laden with unspoken disappointment. "I see. I told him I'd ask you," Kyle continued, his fingers restless against the arm of the chair. "Said you'd been keeping up with the twins' education and doing a fine job of it. That's kind of you to say." "It's the truth." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "The thing is, Ellie, the twins have started asking if you could teach them here permanently, if you might stay with us." Ellie set down her mending, her hands suddenly unsteady. "Mr. Owens, Kyle, please." "Kyle," she corrected, the name feeling intimate on her lips. "Are you suggesting I decline the school position?" "I'm suggesting," he said carefully, "that there might be another arrangement that could benefit everyone involved. The twins need a mother and he stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "And you," Ellie prompted softly. "I find myself thinking about you at the oddest moments," he admitted. "When I'm mending fences or checking the herd, when I see wildflowers that match the blue of your dress. When the twins say something clever they clearly learned from you." He leaned forward. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know a rancher's life isn't what a Boston lady might have dreamed of, but a crash from upstairs interrupted him, followed by guilty giggling and the sound of scampering feet." Kyle closed his eyes briefly. "And there's the other reason I hesitate to court a woman. Those two are enough to scare off any sensible female." Ellie laughed, the tension broken. "I don't scare easily, Mr. Owens, and I find your children utterly charming, eavesdropping tendencies included." "Is that so?" Kyle's smile was cautious but hopeful. "Then might I call on you properly, not as my housekeeper or the twins' temporary teacher, but as a man calls on a woman he admires greatly?" Ellie felt warmth spreading through her chest. "I would like that very much." July brought scorching heat and the cattle drive to the railhead in Tucson. Kyle would be gone for nearly 2 weeks, leaving Ellie in charge of the twins with Mrs. Abernathy coming daily to help. "You sure you'll be all right?" he asked for the 3rd time as he prepared to leave before dawn. "I can send for my cousin Tom to stay if you're worried." "We will be perfectly fine," Ellie assured him, handing him a bundle of food for the journey. "The children and I have a full schedule of lessons and chores, and Mrs. Abernathy has promised to teach us how to make preserves from the garden harvest." Kyle nodded, still hesitating by his horse. In the 3 weeks since their conversation by the fire, their relationship had evolved cautiously. He'd taken her on proper outings, a church picnic, dinner at the hotel in town, even a walk along the creek that ran through his property where they'd sat talking until the stars came out. He'd kissed her just once, a gentle, questioning touch of his lips to hers that had left them both breathless and smiling. 2 weeks, he repeated. Should be back by the full moon, barring any trouble. We'll be here, she promised. After he rode away, Ellie turned to find the twins watching from the porch, their faces solemn in the gray dawn light. Pa always comes back, Elizabeth stated, though her voice held a question. Of course he will, Ellie assured her, drawing both children close. And we'll make him proud by keeping everything running smoothly while he's gone. The first week passed uneventfully, with lessons in the morning and chores in the afternoon. Ellie found herself settling more deeply into life at the ranch, learning its rhythms and peculiarities. She even managed to ride Buttercup to check the nearest pasture each evening, growing more confident in the saddle. It was during the second week that trouble arrived. Ellie was hanging laundry while the twins collected eggs from the chicken coop when the sound of approaching horses made her look up. 3 riders approached from the main road, men she didn't recognize. Something about their manner, the way they sat their horses, the deliberate pace sent a prickle of unease down her spine. Elizabeth, Joseph, she called calmly, please go inside and find Mrs. Abernathy. The children, sensing her tension, obeyed without question, scurrying into the house. Ellie moved to stand on the porch, one hand shading her eyes against the midday sun. Can I help you, gentlemen? She called as they reined in their horses in the yard. The leader, a wiry man with a pockmarked face and tobacco-stained teeth, smiled unpleasantly. Well now, what have we here? Owens didn't mention he'd gotten himself a pretty little wife. I'm not Mr. Owens's wife, Ellie replied evenly. I'm the children's teacher. Mr. Owens is away on business. The 3 men exchanged glances. That's so mighty convenient. We got some unfinished business with Owens. He's got something belongs to us. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Ellie said, though dread was pooling in her stomach. If you'd like to leave a message, I can ensure he receives it when he returns. The leader dismounted, his spurs jangling ominously. Oh, we'll wait, won't we, boys? The other 2 snickered in agreement. Name's Delaney. These are my brothers, Marcus and Paul. Owens crossed us in a business deal few months back. We're here to collect what's owed. Mrs. Abernathy appeared in the doorway behind Ellie, a shotgun held steadily in her gnarled hands. You'd best move along, Delaney. Kyle Owens ain't here and we don't want trouble. Delaney's smile faded. Put that scatter gun down, old woman, before you hurt yourself. I can hit a jackrabbit at 50 paces, Mrs. Abernathy replied coldly. You're a mite bigger target. For a tense moment, Ellie was certain violence would erupt. Then Delaney raised his hands in mock surrender. No call for that. We'll just make camp by your creek and wait for Owens. Shouldn't be more than a few days, right? He turned back to his horse. Don't worry, ladies. We'll keep to ourselves, but Owens owes us and we aim to collect. After they rode toward the creek, Mrs. Abernathy lowered the shotgun. Trouble, she muttered. Those Delaney boys are bad news. Kyle ran them off last spring when they tried stealing some of his prime stock. Will they hurt the children? Ellie asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Not if they know what's good for them. Half the county would hunt them down. Mrs. Abernathy peered toward the creek. But they might burn us out or steal the stock just for spite. One of us should ride for help. You stay with the children, Ellie decided. I'll go to town and send word to Kyle. Mrs. Abernathy looked doubtful. It's 10 miles, girl. You've only just learned to ride. I can manage, Ellie insisted. We'll wait until dark. They're watching the house, but they might not notice if I slip out the back way to the small corral. When night fell, Ellie changed into her simplest dress and boots. The twins watched wide-eyed as Mrs. Abernathy helped her braid her hair tightly and wrap a dark shawl around her shoulders. You be careful, Miss Davidson, Joseph said solemnly. Pa would be mighty upset if something happened to you. Elizabeth nodded vigorously. He likes you special, we can tell. Despite her nerves, Ellie smiled. I like him special too, and you too as well. Which is why I'm going to make sure those men don't cause any trouble. Mrs. Abernathy handed her a small revolver. Kyle keeps this in his desk. You know how to use it. My father taught me, Ellie confirmed, checking that it was loaded before tucking it into her pocket. The weight of it was both reassuring and terrifying. Under cover of darkness, Ellie slipped out the back door and made her way to the small corral where Buttercup was kept. The gentle mare nickered softly as Ellie approached. "Quiet, girl," she whispered, saddling the horse with shaking hands. Every noise, the creaking of leather, the soft stamp of Buttercup's hooves seemed amplified in the night. She had just mounted when a shadow detached itself from the barn. "Going somewhere, teacher lady?" Marcus Delaney's voice was soft but menacing. Ellie's hand moved to her pocket, but before she could draw the revolver, a new voice cut through the darkness. "I wouldn't if I were you." Kyle Owens stepped into the moonlight, his own gun trained steadily on Marcus Delaney. Behind him, several ranch hands spread out, encircling the corral. "Seems I got home just in time," Kyle continued conversationally, though his eyes never left Delaney. "Found your brothers by the creek. They're having a talk with Sheriff Taylor right now." Relief made Ellie dizzy. "Kyle. How did you?" "Tom saw the Delaneys headed this way, rode to catch up with us," Kyle explained, not lowering his weapon. "Now, Delaney, you want to tell me why you're threatening a lady on my property?" Marcus Delaney's face twisted with rage. "You know why, Owens." "That cattle deal was legal and witnessed by the county clerk," Kyle finished. "You and your brothers tried to claim land that wasn't yours using forged deeds. Sheriff gave you fair warning to clear out of the territory. You ruined us," Delaney spat. "You ruined yourselves," Kyle countered. "Now you can come quietly to join your brothers, or you can try something foolish. Your choice." For a moment, Delaney's hand hovered near his holster. Then, seeing himself outnumbered, he slumped in defeat. Two ranch hands moved forward to secure him. Kyle finally lowered his gun and strode to Buttercup's side, reaching up to help Ellie dismount. As her feet touched the ground, Kyle pulled her into a fierce embrace. "When Tom told me the Delaneys were headed here, I've never ridden so hard in my life." Ellie clung to him, the fear she'd suppressed finally breaking free in shuddering breaths. "The children are safe inside with Mrs. Abernathy," he assured her. "My men will keep watch tonight, but the danger's past. Sheriff will take the Delaneys to Tucson for trial." Later, after the children had been reassured and tucked back into bed, Kyle and Ellie sat alone on the porch. The night was peaceful now, scented with sage and cooling earth. "You were going to ride to town," Kyle said, his voice a mixture of admiration and concern. 10 miles at night, having only learned to ride a few weeks ago." "I couldn't just sit and wait for them to decide to burn down the house," Ellie replied. "The children needed protection." Kyle took her hand, his callous thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You know, when Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. Figured I'd raise the twins alone, focus on the ranch. Never expected to find someone who'd face down danger for my children." "They feel like mine too," Ellie admitted softly. "Is that presumptuous?" In answer, Kyle leaned forward and kissed her, not the gentle, questioning kiss of before, but something deeper, a promise and a claiming all at once. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because the twins need a mother, though they do. Not because you need a place, though you're welcome to call this home forever. Marry me because I love you, Ellie Davidson, because these past months have shown me what it is to feel alive again." Joy bloomed in Ellie's chest, as wild and beautiful as the desert flowers after a rare rain. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in September, as golden light bathed the land and the first hint of autumn crispness touched the morning air. The entire town turned out for the celebration, held in the newly rebuilt schoolhouse that Ellie would indeed teach in, though only 3 days a week, by special arrangement with the school board. Elizabeth served as flower girl, scattering wild blossoms with solemn dedication, while Joseph carried the rings tied to a small pillow, his face screwed up in concentration to match his sister's seriousness. "Do you, Kyle James Owens, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. Kyle's eyes never left Ellie's as he answered, "I do." "And do you, Elena Margaret Davidson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Ellie replied, her voice clear and certain. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the twins cheered louder than anyone, rushing forward to embrace them both in a tangle of small arms and joyful faces. "See, Pa," Elizabeth said triumphantly. "I told you we could keep her." Kyle laughed, scooping his daughter up with one arm while keeping the other around his new wife. "And I told you it was up to Miss Davidson to let us. Mrs. Owens now," Joseph corrected importantly. "That's how it works when people get married." Ellie's heart felt too full as she looked at the three faces she had come to love beyond measure. "Mrs. Owens," she agreed, testing the name. "I rather like the sound of that." The reception lasted well into the evening, with tables set up under lantern light and a local fiddle band playing while couples danced in the cleared space before the schoolhouse. Kyle and Ellie swayed together beneath the stars, his arms steady around her waist. Happy. He murmured against her hair. "Completely," she assured him. "Though I keep thinking how different my life would have been if that school hadn't burned down." "Providence," Kyle suggested, "or maybe just good fortune for a lonely widower and his matchmaking children." "Speaking of the children," Ellie said, glancing to where the twins were nodding sleepily against Mrs. Abernathy's sides, "I think it's time we took them home." Home. The word held new meaning now, not just a place, but the people who made it hers. Winter came early that year, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in pristine white. The twins reveled in it, building snow forts and ambushing their father with snowballs when he returned from checking on the cattle. Ellie watched from the porch, laughing as Kyle roared in mock outrage and chased his squealing children across the yard. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, and the house smelled of pine boughs and the cinnamon cookies they'd baked that morning. Ellie placed a hand over her still flat stomach, wondering when the right moment would be to tell Kyle about the child that would join their family come summer. "What are you smiling about, Mrs. Owens?" Kyle asked, stomping snow from his boots as he came up the steps. The twins raced past, heading inside to warm themselves by the fire. "Just thinking how fortunate I am," Ellie replied. "A year ago I was alone in Boston, wondering what my future held." Kyle pulled her into his arms, his cold cheeks pressing against her warm ones. "And now?" "Now I have everything I never knew I wanted," she said simply. "A home, a family, you." Kyle kissed her, his lips cold at first but quickly warming against hers. "Funny how life works out," he murmured. "I sent for a schoolteacher and ended up with a wife who can outride half my ranch hands and charm rattlesnakes." "That was only the one rattlesnake," Ellie protested, "and I was terrified the entire time. Didn't show it. Just calmly told the twins to back away while you distracted it with your parasol." Pride shone in his eyes. "You're something special, Ellie Owens." "Pa, Miss Ellie," Joseph called from the doorway. "Elizabeth is trying to teach the cat to dance," Kyle sighed, resting his forehead against Ellie's. "Never a dull moment. Would you have it any other way?" she asked. His smile was answer enough. "Not for all the gold in California." Inside, Elizabeth was indeed attempting to waltz with a supremely uninterested tabby cat while Joseph provided music by humming tunelessly. "I think," Ellie said carefully, "this might be the perfect moment to share some news." Kyle looked at her curiously. "News?" Ellie guided his hand to her stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Really?" he whispered. "You're sure?" she nodded, suddenly tearful with happiness. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday. Next summer, these two will have a little brother or sister." Kyle's whoop of joy startled the cat from Elizabeth's arms and brought both twins running. "What is it? What happened?" Joseph demanded. "Your father is just very happy," Ellie explained, laughing as Kyle swept her into a dance around the sitting room. "Why?" Elizabeth persisted, tugging at her father's shirt. Kyle stopped spinning, keeping one arm around Ellie as he knelt to the twins' level. "Because my curious daughter, Miss Ellie, has given us the best Christmas gift possible. Come summer, our family will be growing." The twins stared blankly for a moment before Joseph's eyes widened. "A baby, like the Johnsons' new baby, exactly like that," Kyle confirmed. Elizabeth looked thoughtful. "Will it be a girl baby or a boy baby? We won't know until it arrives," Ellie explained. "I hope it's a girl," Elizabeth declared. "Boys are too noisy." "Says the girl who was trying to make a cat dance," Joseph retorted. As the twins began to argue the merits of baby boys versus baby girls, Kyle pulled Ellie close again, his lips brushing her ear. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for saying yes when two presumptuous children asked if we could keep you." "Best question I was ever asked," Ellie replied, turning to kiss him properly. "And the easiest to answer." Summer arrived on a wave of heat that shimmered above the distant mountains. The ranch was prospering, with new calves in the pastures and the promise of a good harvest from the kitchen garden. Kyle had built a cradle from pine wood, while the twins had spent weeks debating names for their impending sibling. When Ellie's time came, it was Mrs. Abernathy who shooed Kyle from the bedroom with instructions to keep the twins occupied and not to worry. "Women have been having babies since Eve," she reminded him firmly. "Your Ellie is strong as they come." Still, Kyle paced the porch for hours, telling the twins increasingly improbable stories about their own births to distract them all from the occasional sounds from upstairs. When Mrs. Abernathy finally appeared at the door, her face was tired but beaming. "Come meet your daughter," she told Kyle. "And the twins can meet their sister." The baby was tiny but perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and her mother's delicate features. Ellie looked exhausted but radiant as she cradled the swaddled infant. "She's beautiful," Kyle whispered, perching carefully on the bed beside them. "Just like her mother." The twins crowded close, their faces solemn with wonder. "She's so small," Joseph marveled. "What's her name?" Elizabeth asked. Ellie smiled up at Kyle. "We thought we'd call her Sarah Rose. After your mother and the flowers that were blooming when your father and I first talked about marriage." Elizabeth reached out a tentative finger to touch her sister's tiny hand. "Hello, Sarah Rose. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you all sorts of things." "And I'll protect you," Joseph added seriously. "That's what big brothers do." Kyle's throat tightened with emotion as he looked at his family, at all his children, and at the remarkable woman who had brought such joy into their lives. "I love you," he told Ellie, not caring that his voice broke. "More than I have words to say." "You don't need words," Ellie assured him, shifting the baby so he could take her. "I see it in everything you do." As Kyle cradled his newborn daughter, with the twins pressed close on either side and Ellie watching with love-filled eyes, he knew with absolute certainty that life could offer no greater happiness than this, a family brought together by chance, cemented by choice, and bound by love that would weather any storm the frontier might bring. 5 years later, the Owens ranch had nearly doubled in size. A second daughter, Catherine, had joined the family 2 years after Sarah Rose, completing their household with her mischievous nature and infectious giggle. The original twins, now 11, had taken to their roles as older siblings with enthusiasm. Though Elizabeth remained convinced that girls were superior to boys, a position Joseph contested vigorously. Ellie divided her time between teaching at the schoolhouse 3 days a week and managing their growing household. Her classroom now included nearly 20 children from surrounding ranches and farms, and she had instituted a lending library that brought books to families across the county. Kyle's cattle operation had prospered, allowing him to build additional rooms onto the house and hire more hands to manage the expanded herds. The Owens name had become synonymous with fair dealing and quality stock throughout the territory. On a crisp October evening, as golden light painted the mountains in shades of amber and rose, the family gathered on the wide front porch that Kyle had added the previous spring. Kyle and Ellie sat side by side on the swing, his arm around her shoulders as they watched their children play in the yard. Sarah Rose toddled after her older siblings, determined to join their game despite her unsteady legs, while Catherine examined a wildflower with serious concentration. "Remember when you first came to Redemption Springs?" Kyle asked, his voice soft with reminiscence. "All proper in your Eastern clothes, looking like you might turn tail and run at the first sign of trouble." Ellie laughed, leaning into his embrace. "I was terrified. Everything was so vast, so wild, nothing like Boston. And now," she surveyed their land, their home, their children, "now I can't imagine being anywhere else. This is where I belong." Kyle pressed a kiss to her temple. "Lucky for me, the twins asked if we could keep you." Lucky for me you said if she'll let us, Ellie countered. It gave me the choice. Best choice you ever made, Kyle said confidently. Ellie smiled, watching as Elizabeth showed Joseph how to make a crown of autumn leaves for Sarah Rose. No, she corrected gently. The best choice was deciding to come west in the first place. Everything good in my life flowed from that one decision. As twilight deepened and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Kyle called the children in for supper. They came running, faces flushed with play and happiness, secure in the knowledge that they were loved beyond measure. Ellie rose, lifting Catherine into her arms while Kyle swung Sarah Rose onto his shoulders. Elizabeth and Joseph raced ahead, arguing about who would get to ring the dinner bell. Together, the Owens family walked into their home, leaving the vast western sky to watch over the land that had brought them together, a teacher seeking adventure, a widower raising twins, and the love that had turned them from strangers into family.